Meet George. He's a smiley, giggly, content 2-year-old with four-limb asymmetrical cerebral palsy and global developmental learning delay. I have created this presentation because Sheffield Council have allocated George a place at Woolly Wood, a special needs school that caters for all types of disability, and we, his parents, would like him to attend the Specialist Cerebral Palsy School Paces. Both schools are within a 15-minute drive from the family home, and Paces have already allocated George a place. The reason the council have given for their choice is inefficient use of resources. Paces cost £529 extra per month. I would appreciate 10 minutes of your time to talk about why George is the perfect fit for Paces, the difference between Woolly Wood and Paces, and why a short-term spend is both an investment for George and the taxpayer. So how does cerebral palsy affect George? It affects his physical development, his bone health and cardiovascular health, his cognitive development, his ability to communicate, his visual development, social development, and emotional well-being. So why Paces? Paces is a specialist school whose approach has been developed specifically for children with cerebral palsy. To best benefit from Paces, a child has to have the potential to learn and a neuromotor disability like cerebral palsy. George has four-limb cerebral palsy. As for George's potential, well, see for yourself.
Go.
So what does a typical day at Paces look like? Throughout the day, George will be in a small class with a high staff-pupil ratio. All children will have cerebral palsy and they will do activities together. In the morning, George will take part in a physical programme using play-based motivation to complete tasks in lying, sitting and standing positions. He will learn about his body, how to manage and control his movements. This will improve core strength and work towards giving George independence. The rest of the day will focus on applying those skills to everyday tasks such as playing bricks or personal care. Doing physical activities with other children with similar needs to George means he can learn through copying. He can have role models and become a role model. The staff are all experienced in cerebral palsy and have a can-do attitude. This in turn will give George a can-do attitude. All this will help promote and build George's self-esteem. Unfortunately, George's hips are partially dislocated. To minimise further migration, it's vital that George is in the correct posture whilst doing activities outside of his supportive equipment. This condition is common to children with cerebral palsy. At Paces, all staff are experienced and understand the importance of this. George will also get lots of opportunities to develop fine motor skills. He will get toilet training and help to develop skills needed for independent eating. So how does Woolly Wood compare? George will be in a room with 10 children. They'll be the most severely disabled in Sheffield, of all types of disabilities, including Downs, autism, behavioural difficulties, and severe and profound learning difficulties. Most of the children will be physically able, and the staff ratio will be 2 to 1. So what does a 2-to-1 ratio mean in practice? For 25% of the day, George would get 1-to-1 doing George-focused activities away from other children. They would be activities stated in his healthcare plan, and for George would be 30 minutes of physiotherapy and 1 hour doing portage type activities. The rest of the day, 75% of the day, George would be in small groups doing activities that cater for all the children in that group. I've stated 3-to-1 ratio as an average. In reality, the ratio would depend upon the combination of pupils and the activities offered. The problem with ratios 2-to-1 or above is that George is essentially like a 2-year-old without the use of 3 limbs. He wants to physically interact with his environment and play with toys, but to do so he needs an extra hand. To develop skills outside his supportive chair, he needs 1-to-1. The problem with the 2-to-1 ratio is that because George needs 1-to-1 to physically interact with his environment or to be out of his supportive chair, he will effectively spend on average 3 hours per day strapped to a chair, unable to physically interact with his environment, looking on. I've created a table to illustrate the key differences between the two schools. The number of children within the class is smaller at Paces. The types of disability in Paces, all children in his class will have cerebral palsy. In Woolleywood it be a range of disabilities. The ratio is much better in Paces with 3 adults to 4 children. The time spent on physical skills is a minimum of 3 hours at Paces, which is 6 times the amount of the minimum at Woolleywood. The activities specific to George's learning needs, all at Paces versus just 25% at Woolleywood. The expertise needed for George's hip condition is at Paces, not at Woolleywood. And because at Paces he will do physical skills alongside other children, he will have role models and he will also be able to learn through copying. Toilet training is automatic at Paces, it's not at Woolleywood. So why is it important to invest in George? This is a graph that shows the relationship between function and age in cerebral palsy. Children can only gain function up until the age of about 10. The aim after is to maintain function. The next few years and the therapy input is therefore vital, as they will determine George's function as an adult. The more time George spends on developing his physical skills, the closer he will get to his physical potential. So why is this important? If George gets the right physical input over the next few years, he's more likely to be able to stand as an adult. If he's able to stand, then George won't need specialist hoist equipment. This opens up the activities and places that George and us as a family can go. It would mean that George can use the toilet. We as a family could go on holidays that don't need specialist hoist equipment. It will make George's world bigger and more enriching. In the long term, we as already older parents can look after him for longer. And if he does need an extra care, he would only need 1 carer, not 2. This in turn would save the taxpayer tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds. So, to summarise, if George goes to Paces, he will get a lot more physical input. The ratio of staff to pupil is better. He gets the right expertise needed to prevent further hip damage. All the activities at Paces are specific to George's needs, and he's more likely to come close to reaching his potential. If he goes to Woolleywood, he'll get a lot less physical input. The ratio is worse. They don't have the expertise needed to protect his hips. And 75% of the activities are designed to cater for all the children of different types of disability. And our view as George's parents is he's very unlikely to come close to reaching his potential. Thank you very much for your time.